For millennia, we've been told the ancient Egyptian underworld was a place of myth and magic, a symbolic map for the soul's journey after death. But what if it was more than that? What if it was a real, physical place? A hidden city, right under the pyramids, built to protect knowledge so powerful it was forbidden. Ancient texts whisper of a place called the Halls of Amenti, a subterranean library of wisdom from a lost civilization, guarded deep beneath the Giza plateau. For centuries, this was written off as pure legend. But now, some startling new claims, based on cutting-edge tech, suggest this mythical place isn't just a story. Today, we're looking at the so-called proof that could rewrite history, and the epic scientific showdown that is ignited. This story really begins not with what we've found, but with what was written down. The legend of a world beneath our own, a kingdom of knowledge, has been around for thousands of years. It's been called a lot of names, but the most famous is the Halls of Amenti. What if the biggest, most mysterious buildings on Earth, the Giza pyramids, were just the tip of the iceberg? The capstones on a monument far, far larger and almost entirely underground. And what if we finally had the technology to see it? I put together a full deep dive file on this, link in description. To really get what's being claimed today, you have to understand that there are two totally different stories about the Egyptian underworld. First, there's the one from mainstream Egyptology, pieced together from incredible ancient sources like the pyramid texts and the Book of the Dead. They describe a realm called the Duat. This wasn't a place you could just dig down to. It was a complex spiritual dimension, a world of gods, monsters, and trials that a dead pharaoh's soul had to get through to be reborn. It was a journey of transformation, a symbolic world where the sun god Ra traveled every night before rising again at dawn. For the ancient Egyptians, the Duat was absolutely real, but its reality was mystical, not geological. But then, there's another story. This one's a more modern, esoteric take that imagines the spiritual Duat as a physical location, a real place hidden deep inside the earth. This idea got a huge boost from Hermetic texts and really took off in the 20th century. At the heart of this new myth is Thoth, the ancient Egyptian god of wisdom and writing. In this version of the story, Thoth is remade as an immortal priest-king from Atlantis, a survivor of a great flood who brought the wisdom of his lost civilization to Egypt. This alternative story is most famously captured in a text called the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Now let's be crystal clear. These are not ancient Egyptian artifacts. The Emerald Tablets were written in the 1930s by a man named Maurice Doreal. But even though they're modern, you can't ignore their influence on this whole mystery, because they created a tantalizing blueprint for what people started looking for. The tablets describe the Halls of Amenti in incredible detail. They talk about halls deep in Earth's heart, shielded from the world. They describe chambers where ancient beings lie in suspended animation, just waiting to be woken up. And most importantly, they describe the halls as a library of cosmic wisdom from a long-lost civilization. This text paints a picture not of a spiritual underworld, but of a high-tech bunker, an archive of forbidden history. And it's this very specific vision that has fueled a search for the last 100 years. With this mythical map in hand, explorers and researchers have been drawn to the Giza plateau for generations, convinced there just had to be something under the sand. The first real hints of an underground world came back in the 19th century. Guys like the British consul General Henry Salt and his buddy, the adventurer Giovanni Caviglia, wrote about climbing down into a network of natural caves near the Great Pyramid. This system got the nickname the Tomb of the Birds because of all the mummified birds they found inside. But what they described weren't grand halls. They were tight, natural limestone caves and shafts. It was interesting for sure, but it wasn't a lost city. Still, the idea was planted. There was something down there. That idea was picked up by modern researchers like Andrew Collins, who has argued for decades that this cave system is way bigger than mainstream archaeology thinks. He believes this natural network might have been the original physical inspiration for the spiritual idea of the Duat. Collins's work is mostly speculative and way outside the academic consensus, but he makes a compelling case that there's a huge, unexplored world just out of sight. The hunt for a secret chamber got a huge dose of publicity from the American psychic Edgar Cayce in the early 20th century. Cayce talked about a Hall of Records, an ancient library built by survivors from Atlantis, hidden in a chamber right under the paws of the Great Sphinx. This prophecy got a ton of people excited. The only problem? It's never been found. Decades of scientific surveys, from ground-penetrating radar in the 90s to the latest muon scans, have combed the area around the Sphinx. They found some small, naturally occurring cracks and cavities, but zero evidence of a large, man-made room. So for decades, the search for the Halls of Amenti was a dead end. The myths were powerful. The early finds were intriguing, but the hard science just wasn't there. The official story held strong. The Giza Plateau was well explored, and the Duat was a spiritual idea, not a GPS coordinate. In March 2025, an Italian and Scottish research group calling themselves the Khafre Project held a press conference. For anyone paying attention, it felt like an earthquake. The team, led by figures like Professor Corrado Malanga, engineer Filippo Biondi, and researcher Armando May, announced they'd done the impossible. They had scanned the earth beneath the Khafre Pyramid, the second biggest pyramid at Giza, to a depth of nearly 2 kilometers. They did this using a technique they call synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, Doppler tomography. Basically, they used satellite radar signals combined with complex math analyzing tiny vibrations in the ground to create a 3D map of what's deep in the bedrock. They claimed this let them see through kilometers of solid limestone, something that traditional GPR, which can only see a few feet down, could never do. And what they said they found was absolutely breathtaking. It wasn't a room or a tunnel. It was a city. Their findings, which they rolled out in press releases and online talks, described a massive, multi-level complex that sounded like it was ripped straight from the pages of the Emerald Tablets. First, they said they found 5 small, identical chambers inside the base of the Khafre Pyramid itself. But that was just the appetizer. Below ground, their scans apparently revealed 8 huge cylindrical shafts, described as hollow vertical wells, some going down 648 meters. That's over 2,100 feet straight down into the earth, surrounded by what they say are descending spiral pathways. Even deeper where these 8 shafts met, the researchers reported finding 2 massive cubic structures, each one about 80 meters on a side. Think about that. 2 perfect cubes, each the size of a 25-story building, buried more than half a kilometer underground. And finally, they claimed this whole network was just one piece of an even bigger system. Their initial data, they said, suggested that underground structures stretched for about 2 kilometers. connecting the pyramids of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure into one massive, integrated complex. In total, they claimed the underground city was 10 times the volume of the Giza pyramids above it. The Khafre Project team wasn't shy about what they thought they'd found. Researcher Armando May directly connected the radar images to the legends of Amenti. He called the shafts access points, and the deep chambers the memory vaults of eternal knowledge from the myths. According to their data, the pyramids weren't just tombs. They were markers, the visible tip of an impossibly large iceberg. For a moment, it seemed the myth had become reality. The Khafre Project's announcement went viral. It was the ultimate "I told you so," the smoking gun that fans of lost civilizations had been waiting for. But in the world of mainstream Egyptology and geophysics, the reaction wasn't excitement. It was a massive, collective eye roll. Almost immediately, experts started shutting the claims down. The most prominent voice, of course, was Dr. Zahi Hawass, Egypt's former head of antiquities and the world's most famous archaeologist. Hawass has overseen decades of work at Giza and flat out called the Khafre Project's claims completely wrong. He stressed that the technology they used was neither scientifically approved nor validated. He pointed out that years of high-tech scans, including the incredibly sophisticated Scan Pyramids project, had found voids and corridors inside the pyramids, but absolutely nothing like a city underneath them. The criticism wasn't just from archaeologists, it was technical. Professor Lawrence Conyers, a radar expert from the University of Denver, said he was extremely doubtful their tech could do what they said it did. He and other geophysicists pointed to a basic law of physics. High-frequency radar signals are great for surface imaging, but they're terrible at getting through dense rock. The idea that they could get clear images from 2 kilometers deep in solid limestone was, in his words, an enormous exaggeration. Another expert who reviewed a related paper by the team was even more blunt, stating that SAR data can't see through rock, period. Skeptics also pointed to the researchers themselves. Professor Corrado Malanga, for instance, is known in Italy for his work on fringe topics, including UFOs, which made the academic world even more hesitant to take his archaeological claims seriously. But the biggest problem was the lack of proof. As of right now, in mid-2026, the Khafre Project's incredible findings have not been published in a major, peer-reviewed scientific journal. And more importantly, not a single shovel has hit the dirt. There's been no excavation, no drilling, no physical attempt to prove that these radar blips are man-made structures, and not just natural caves, water-filled caverns, or even just glitches in the data. So, the proof from our title is stuck in limbo. It's a set of revolutionary images on a computer screen presented by a team that is totally convinced they've made the discovery of a lifetime. But it's also unverified, unpublished, and dismissed by the very experts who know the Giza Plateau best. This leaves us standing on a fascinating and frustrating edge, caught between 2 stories that just can't both be true. On one side, you have the Khafre Project. They've presented very specific claims of a huge underground complex that looks exactly like the Halls of Amenti from the legends. They continue to defend their work, arguing their methods are sound and have been tested on other known structures at Giza. They're betting their careers on the idea that they've invented a revolutionary technology that can see the invisible. And what they're seeing is a lost chapter of human history. On the other side, you have the unified voice of the scientific establishment. They argue that extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence, and computer images from an unproven technology don't cut it. They see this as a classic case of wishful thinking, of seeing patterns in the noise that fit a story you already believe. They point to geology, physics, and the lack of peer review as giant red flags. So, could the Khafre Project be right? Is it possible they've really developed a new kind of remote sensing that science just hasn't caught up with yet? History is full of ideas that were rejected at first. Galileo was condemned, and the idea of continental drift was laughed at for decades. Is this one of those moments? Or is it more likely that the team has fallen into one of the oldest traps in science, seeing what you want to see? The Giza Plateau is full of natural caves and aquifers. Is it possible their tech is just picking up these natural features and their software is connecting the dots into patterns that aren't really there? The question of proof comes down to this. A signal on a screen is not a discovery. It is a target for investigation. The real work, the drilling, the digging, the physical confirmation, is yet to be done. Until it is, the Halls of Amenti remain exactly where they have been for centuries, in that thrilling space between myth and reality. We started by asking, what if the Egyptian underworld was a real place? We followed that question from the spiritual world of the Duat to the mythical halls of Thoth, through the dusty caves of 19th century explorers, and into the deep digital world of the Khafre Project's radar. So, have we found proof that the Halls of Amenti are real? The honest answer is no. What we have is a team that claims they've found proof, and their claims are so specific, so detailed, and so perfectly matched to one of our most enduring legends that you can't just ignore them. The Giza Plateau keeps its secrets well, but the whispers of a hidden world beneath the pyramids have never gone away. Now, with claims of a city-sized structure waiting in the deep, we have to ask, are we on the verge of the greatest archaeological discovery in history, or its most elaborate illusion? The answer, for now, is still buried, waiting to be unearthed. What do you think? Is the Khafre Project onto something huge? Or is this just a high-tech mirage in the desert? Let us know your theories in the comments below. And if you want to follow this mystery as it unfolds, make sure to subscribe and like this video. It helps us keep the investigation going. If this blew your mind, the file goes 10 times deeper. I put together a full deep dive file on this. Link in description below. Thanks for watching. Until next time.